Custodia Bank's founder and CEO, Caitlin Long, has now openly said that XRP has failed. I'm not kidding. In 2025, how can anyone say such with composure? It's mind-blowing. However, she went one step further and made outright untrue claims regarding XRP and the XRP ledger, which I will undoubtedly explore in this post. I've been following her for years and years and years, and she has never really impressed me as being aggressively tribal, which is why it's fascinating. This is unlike anything I've ever seen. I've never seen her do anything that would suggest she had XRP derangement syndrome. She might not be here either. In fact, I have another theory, which I will discuss with you at the beginning of this movie. Here's a small guess as to what started all of this bullshit. However, I suspect that she is not afflicted with XRP derangement syndrome. I believe she simply holds some really negative views. You'll see why I believe she has some really negative opinions about what's happening. The transcription is with me. Do you hear? In my hands, that is a dead tree indeed. We call that paper, and this is what I transcribed. Where did this come from, she said, knowing that the XRP army would not be happy because it was a podcast. She went so far as to say that. Still, this occurred. I'm therefore really happy that I have my platform in order to refute almost everything she claimed regarding this subject. Ladies and gentlemen, take a seat, put your feet up, give a toesy wowsy, and settle in if you want to take a break and prepare some popcorn. Caitlin Long's Custodia Bank is all right now. I have brought them up on my channel a few times, particularly during the height of the SEC versus Ripple dispute, when the Federal Reserve and the Biden administration continually prevented Caitlin Long's Custodia Bank from accessing the Fed's payment system. You know, even though its construction complies with regulations and is entirely reserved. So that was a waste of time. Naturally, this was not a huge surprise because it was widely perceived as a component of the larger anti-crypto posture taken by US regulators. As I mentioned earlier, it was occurring with the SEC versus Ripple. Naturally, though, the US is now officially pro-crypto for the first time in history as a result of Trump's election and the political tide shifting. In the end, that does create opportunities for banks, such as Custodia Bank in this case. However, Custodia Bank faced years of unreasonable opposition. And I was definitely on her side, you know? Even on this channel, I sympathized with that. Clearly, things have changed. Perhaps it's just jealousy. Perhaps it's because Caitlin Long now sees Ripple as a rival. Perhaps that's what's happening here. You are all familiar with this tale. This is from Reuters on July 2nd. The next step for Crypto I is Ripple's application for a U.S. national bank charter.
In this sense, Ripple is indeed aiming to become a national bank. Additionally, according to this source, they are submitting an application for a FedMaster account, which would enable them to hold their stablecoin reserves directly with the central bank and grant them access to the Federal Reserve's payment system. This implies that the U.S. federal government would actually hold RLUSD, Ripple's stablecoin, which XRP powers on the XRP ledger. Nevertheless, if it were approved. And for years and years and years, Caitlin Long has been working to get Custodia Bank this. Additionally, Ripple is entering the market and is in a strong position to win this. And I'm just curious whether this is the first time she's speaking up. She now perceives XRP and Ripple as threats, which makes me extremely wary of them. And let me tell you, that's usually the reason why people voice their opinions and unjustly criticize XRP and/or Ripple. It's because it makes them feel threatened. That's the poisonous maximalist approach to Bitcoin. Now, this is obviously just conjecture, and I'm not saying she's a maximalist. I have no idea why she is talking the things that she is saying here, and I will tell you all about it. It's nonsense. That's all I know for sure. And it's fascinating that she's speaking out like this for the first time, and it coincides with XRP's complete dominance of the cryptocurrency market in many aspects, as well as Ripple's successful entry into the market as a rival, if anything. The way that works out is kind of interesting, isn't it? As a result of my fellow XRP YouTuber Crypto Eddie's statement, everyone is now discussing this, including me. Thus, give credit where credit is due. She is the one who started all of this, in my opinion. All of these make me believe that Caitlin Long had a rough day in the X notification sections. Crypto Eddie, however, wrote, "The entire blockchain community should be deeply disappointed in the comments made by Caitlin Long in a podcast. In the show, she confuses the centralized digital asset company Ripple with the decentralized XRP ledger. This isn't being a leader. Tribalism like this is nasty. Once more, your guess as to why she did this is as good as mine." Additionally, I was unaware of this podcast. The podcast is called Gold goats in guns. I've never heard of it. That's all right there on your screen. But let me tell you what she said. In answer, I had a lot to say. I'll just say that. I was able to obtain the transcription here. According to the podcast's host, Ripple, the Ripple network appears to be poised for success for a number of reasons. You are free to disagree with me on that. All I can do is read what I see. So I'm not. When I mention it, everyone says, you're shilling for Ripple. All right, I was therefore stopping out there. The host seemed to genuinely believe that XRP and/or Ripple makes sense, which is a very good opinion.
And you see, I enjoy and respect people regardless of whether they share my views on XRP. Therefore, Caitlin Long is simply incredibly ignorant and should have known better than to discuss any of this on a podcast if she truly believes the information she has stated here.
Here, that's one thing. However, if she only has a few negative thoughts, then people are free to hold absurd views. That's fine with me. It's okay, and perhaps that is a contributing factor in this situation. Therefore, it might be a combination of those factors. However, this is what she stated in reality. I believe she overstated the significance of that network when she replied, I don't mind that, because it is a centralized network and tokenomics is outdated. Banks have long been wary of it, which contributes to the issue.
All right, let's take a moment there. The decentralized nature of the XRP ledger is evident. I'd want to sip some water. 1 second. The XRP ledger is decentralized. She's wrong about that. There isn't a primary point of collapse. She is already here confusing XRP with Ripple. Of course, Ripple is a business. On the XRP ledger, there is a cryptocurrency called XRP. This is it. And in 2025, because she's really smart, mind you, she is a clever aspirational person here. She began working with cryptocurrency in 2012. Her bio states that she has been a Wall Street veteran for 22 years. Hearing anything like this come from her mouth is simply incredible. This is utterly absurd. Furthermore, what is the backward state of tokenomics? I've talked about this a lot with different people who bring up this point. It's a pointless argument. You know what happened with tokenomics? XRP was developed, correct? Additionally, the XRP inventors gave Ripple a sizable portion of their money. Additionally, Ripple's founders received pieces. All of this is known to the public. This was not done in a dark back room of some kind.
What did they get, do you know?
They received an asset worth exactly $0 when they received XRP. And from the very beginning, this was known. It wasn't exchanged. There was no monetary value for it. It had no assurance that it would ever be worth a single cent. It's not a given that it would be worth a single dime. It was simply outside. Every detail was known to the public. It then gained a market value when individuals independently decided they wanted to trade it. If everything is transparent and people voluntarily decide to engage in the purchasing and selling of XRP, how is it backwards? What might backward tokenomics look like? There's no logic behind that. Additionally, I'll tell you this. I was discussing this topic not too long ago. The reason it arose was quite different. Chris Larson, for example, received XRP, if you want to call it that. They recognized that since this was a new asset class, there was a chance that the government might target him. So it was essentially part of a compensation package. They were hoping that XRP might be valuable, so that was part of it. They could never have predicted that it would rank among the top 100 assets in the world, which is exactly what it is at the moment. It did, however, turn into that. Therefore, it was hoped that it would provide them with some kind of motivation to take the chance. Because you could never be certain that the FBI would come and tear down the doors. That was half-jokingly said in public by Bob Way, an early Ripple employee. He's one of the original employees of Ripple, a very small company, and he says, "We didn't know in the early days. We had no idea if the federal government would suddenly show up and kick the door down." Furthermore, that was literally true. Thus, Chris Larson received a significant amount of XRP. However, you know what happened years later, so the worries were also justified. In addition to Ripple, the SEC also filed a lawsuit against Chris Larson directly. What does backwards tokenomics mean then? Anyone who didn't want to participate didn't have to. Everything was done in public. And what do you know? Actually, a large number of people disapproved of it, offered criticism, and chose not to take part. And that's okay, I say. However, I learned about this. When I first learned about tokenomics in 2017, I thought, oh, I do like this. This sounds good. All right, you have a big cryptocurrency corporation that is, if anything, the biggest supporter of XRP on the planet at the moment. It sounds nice. When practically no coins are utilized for anything, there is a real use case for XRP. It sounds nice. Nothing about this is backwards. And then she continues. One of the steps back in creating these token platforms is that the people who extracted money up front are never going to be trusted, because everybody's going to look and think that anything that they do is an exit scam and try and dump on retail. Well, that's obviously not the case. It would only be poisonous Bitcoin maximalists who would accuse someone who is an executive involved with Ripple or who created XRP of being involved in any scheme.
Apparently Caitlin Long as well, since who didn't claim to be a scammer? None of this was a hoax, not even the SEC, which actually sued Ripple. No fraud occurred. There was no fraud. Absolutely nothing was done. There is an open market price for XRP. Everything is proceeding as planned. XRP has been on the rise. And I'll tell you what, Caitlin Long, if this is a scam, I have to ask you this. How in the world could a scam of this size continue to the extent that XRP is currently ranked third in market capitalization 13 years after it was first created? You're saying this with a straight face. How long has that been going on?
Do you really believe that people everywhere are so dim-witted that they are unable to recognize a legitimate scam? These 7 publicly traded firms have declared that they hold XRP as a treasury reserve asset. I believe the first of these companies was listed in December. Are you implying that they were unable to recognize that this is an exit scam, as you stated, intended just to defraud retail? And how in the world is it ranked third in terms of market capitalization if they are so aggressively dumping on retail? With all this dumping going on, how in the hell is that possible? Is it possible that Ripple is truly selling little insignificant pieces of an asset that they legally control based on a very small percentage? It represents a very small portion of the total volume that is exchanged during any particular time frame. That might be it. That is, in fact, it. Additionally, that information is known to the public. You can look up this information on Google. How can you look straight while saying any of this? It simply isn't logical. Caitlin Long, nobody who is legitimate genuinely believes what you just stated. No one with a reputation. No one. The only people expressing such things are ignorant fools and toxic Bitcoin maximalists. It's not logical. I can only assume that you are saying this because I suppose Ripple is now a threat. What else is it? What the devil is it really? It's coming out of your mouth. It only gets worse. People, stay with me. This is completely out of control. This is about to become really bad, so stay with me. She continues by saying that tokenization platforms with little to no upfront funding are the most successful, and that includes Ethereum and Bitcoin. That's how easy it is. Since all of the money raised up front was the first of the ICOs in their case, I don't think you'll ever gain trust. In other words, they've been here longer than practically anyone else. All right, that's the only issue with it. Nothing could be further from the truth than that. It's unbelievable that we haven't had to say this in 2025 XRP. Does she have internet access? Could someone check to see whether she has internet access? Perhaps she doesn't. Perhaps she simply doesn't. Is this account being used by someone else? She is a ghost on this, I'll tell you that. She has decided not to respond to anything related to this. She has made it quite apparent that she will wait for the storm to pass. However, no ICO existed. For XRP, there was no initial coin offering. The XRP ledger was actually fully developed, thus it just functioned when it was launched. She claimed that neither Bitcoin nor Ethereum has initial coin offerings, ICOs, which is what makes Ethereum so hilarious. The first ICO was Ethereum. They were literally the first, I think. It was an initial coin offering. However, I'm very certain it was the first one, and that's why I find this amusing. In order to develop Ethereum, all of that money was gathered. When they first began collecting money 10 years ago, it literally didn't exist. However, with XRP, it was fully operational from the start. It simply was. They were not obtaining funds from external investors. The ICO did not exist. Literally, there was no ICO. In 2025, how must I phrase this? Furthermore, she is not a moron. For example, why is she saying these things? It is just utterly absurd. Well, here we go. She said, and they haven't made a lot of progress. Well, there we have it. Guys, XRP is a failure. What did they attempt to do now? They are attempting to issue a stablecoin, their stablecoin, and obtain its own regulated financial institutions rather than attempting to sell that to the banking sector. That is, in a sense, an acknowledgement that the base layer blockchain did not receive the level of adoption it had hoped for. All right. They are not attempting to introduce a stablecoin. To start, a stablecoin was launched by them. It took place in December. Caitlin Long, where are you? What exactly are you discussing here? Furthermore, the introduction of a stablecoin on a blockchain is currently interpreted as an acknowledgement that the blockchain is, what are you discussing? Does that imply that they are Ethereum stablecoins? Does that imply Ethereum's failure? Because she does so later in this transcription as well, and you're supporting Ethereum here. Is Ethereum a failure? Stablecoins can be found there. Or is Ripple simply a failure? Are you suggesting that Ripple has failed since they continue to grow and achieve success after success? Are you referring to XRP as a bridge currency only? You see, if the argument is really just that, no, it's XRP, it's not replacing Swift, she goes into further detail about this in a moment. All right, If that's the case and they've already failed and you're claiming that stablecoins are to blame, may I ask why SWIFT is still in operation? Shouldn't something have replaced SWIFT for XRP to fail, or does SWIFT simply never go away? What on earth are you? Because she ultimately claims that even Ripple is aware that the stablecoins are performing a task that XRP is unable to perform. Because XRP simply isn't up to par, Ripple introduced a stablecoin. Never mind that XRP is the main bridge currency in practically all payment flows today in 2025. Stablecoins like RLUSD are only used in corridors where it isn't logical for regulatory reasons, such as any corridor that interacts with the United States. This information is openly accessible. For example, why must we have this conversation? Folks, this is why we are unable to have pleasant things. We are unable to have pleasant things because of this. This is utterly ridiculous. There you have it. I suppose there are reasons why XRP didn't work as a bridge currency. Is Ripple going to introduce a stablecoin? No, it was unable to.
Since Ripple has been doing that for custody as well, it is impossible to imagine a world in which they merely wish to establish themselves as the authority on all things cryptocurrency. Did you fail to see that? Does that imply that they were unsuccessful? Therefore, they failed if they tried anything else to mature, branch out, or do something different? And even though they have so far been successful, this was the first thing they attempted. This is not a logical argument at all. Ripple concluded that they couldn't destroy SWIFT with XRP. And again, even if that were the truth, they would say, okay, let's just pretend that Caitlin Long is right. I take it that they will now attempt it with a stablecoin? Does she have no idea how technology functions? Every transaction involving the stablecoin on the XRP ledger physically requires XRP. It is coded in such a manner. Therefore, even if that occurred, XRP would still be required. Because investors will see that you cannot have functionally viable RLUSD if you do not have a successful XRP. XRP continues to win, and money keeps coming in. Therefore, a certain fraction will always earn XRP if more people desire to invest in cryptocurrency. Her reasoning thus breaks down even at that point. You can slice and dice this thing in a million different ways. It's not difficult. Did she give her remarks some thought before making them public? Please pardon me, I simply have no idea. It appears that she thought about it for some time. This is really amazing, not less for someone with intelligence. Simply put, why is she acting in this way? She went on to say, now, I will also say that the administration was a big part of that, right? So force them offshore and say things like, you can't basically do the SEC again or sue the SEC again for trying to use that as because although it may sound strange, you know how people talk and then you start a sentence and then you're like, no, scratch that. Then you start talking, but when the human is saying it, it's in real time and you can understand what they're saying. But it sounds like jumbled mush when someone reads it back. Just so you're aware, that's what's going on here. I'm reading it exactly as it is. They should be forced offshore and told, you can't basically do the SEC again for trying to use them as that, as it was the first initial coin offering, ICO, to declare that the securities offering was unlawful. Between that, Row Factory, the XRP, is one of its does everything done's when you're well. And pursuing that, they were hamstrung by that. It's not an ICO once more. Even the SEC denied that there was an initial coin offering. I mean, this is absurd, come on. Yes, hamstrung them. Ripple was completely slowed down by the US federal government. And your bank was also slowed down. Donkey balls kind of suck like that. And you're doing this nonsense instead of coming together.
Thank you for nothing. She goes on to explain that it didn't harm Ripple as much as the Fed did us. Oh well, dear Caitlin Long. Did that Ripple cause you any harm from the big, terrible government? I'm not sure. Caitlin Long, may I ask if you spent $200 million on your defense? Ripple did, so no, you didn't. And the entire class of crypto assets was at risk, since all altcoins, in the United States at least, would have finally met the same end if things had gone badly in that scenario. That was the danger, because if XRP were a security, then everything else was as well, except Bitcoin. However, Caitlin Long, you are more hurt by the Fed. Oh, I see. The world she lives in is not like this. She continues by saying that all of the people the Biden administration targeted suffered from various forms of harm. However, I'm admitting that the XRP army will target me since I stated something that in my opinion makes sense and that it won't take over. It isn't. All right, the market will not be dominated by XRP. What exactly are you discussing? Does she really believe that there is only one application for XRP? Furthermore, why is the standard for XRP so much higher and for Bitcoin so much lower? Have you ever posed that question? Ever ponder that question? She and others like her will simply admit that Bitcoin is the cryptocurrency equivalent of a pet rock. It doesn't do things, it doesn't
actually accomplish much. It's a value store. That's the story then? It's gold 2.0? That's the story. That's what? It does nothing but store value. There you have it. There is nothing more that it needs to do. It simply prevails. It simply prevails because it does. The reason for this is that it was the first to act. Why is the bar so high for XRP, yet so low for Bitcoin, considering that XRP was designed to be a superior alternative to Bitcoin, which it most definitely is? What is the assumption that it must now effectively replace SWIFT by serving as the main bridge currency for foreign exchange transactions? Because I'll be honest with you, I dislike you. I am uncertain about the long-term prospects of Ripple and the placement of XRP as a bridge currency. Right now, it's functioning really nicely. However, I can tell you that no one can predict the future, and I've known this all along.
Therefore, although it doesn't actually have a first-mover advantage, it does in theory. It is among the earliest cryptos ever made. The market seems to value it, which is why it's ranked third in terms of market capitalization. But wait, there's more. Billy Mays here with another intriguing product, isn't there? There's more though. It can be used for numerous purposes. It's actually used by businesses in their payment processes. For years and years and years, I have been covering this. Additionally, we learned of a wide range of businesses that were using XRP for different purposes. In fact, a variety of businesses emerged from the shadows in amicus filings submitted in the SEC versus Ripple case. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be aware that we were acting. Additionally, it turns out that you may tokenize assets on the XRP ledger, such as money market funds and T-bills. On the XRP ledger, even gold has been tokenized. Please pardon me. The source of this cough is unknown to me. In any case, the market has already determined that XRP is valuable for a number of reasons, including just performing the functions that Bitcoin should have performed. This means that even if XRP fails as a bridge currency, which it most definitely hasn't done thus far, it will still be able to survive. It simply is. As a result, this notion that, she mentioned once more, failed here, what exactly are you discussing? Because she reiterated that it would have taken over long ago if it were going to do so. Is that correct? Well, even if she were, let's take another look. Are you certain about what Ripple is doing and XRP as a bridge currency? This is because SWIFT hasn't been overtaken by stablecoins. Does that imply that SWIFT will always be there because it never happened, similar to a finger snap? Imagine what would happen if someone took that. Indeed, some people approached Amazon with that mindset and that kind of approach, which I suppose they would have referred to as analytical thinking. Would you have said that about Amazon in the 1990s? Oh, well, what are you talking about, they ask. You're not even making a profit here, even if money is coming in. Well, you only sell books, your Amazon books, that is. You sell nothing else at all. Like, what's happening? As a result, Amazon lost money for the majority of its existence. And the individuals who made those arguments and their remarks grew old like fine milk. After years of losses, it finally made money. Therefore, those who were pessimistic were just mistaken. Because it hasn't reached the timescale you believe it should have, XRP has failed, or is failing specifically for this use case, if you're going to say that. And it would have occurred by now if it was going to. People are making the same kind of ridiculous remarks about Amazon. By now, it would have happened if it was going to work and be profitable. Everything is going to collapse. These arguments were made by people, and they were incorrect in any case. Here, XRP is already well established. People like what it gives, and it truly does just work. They appreciate its qualities, and it is useful. All of this is untrue. Not a bit of it. It really came out of nowhere, and I'm really surprised to see this from her. I may therefore assume that it has something to do with the fact that she doesn't see Ripple as a rival. What else could it be like? I'm not sure. She continued by saying, and now they've actually pivoted to issuing us dollar stablecoins on the network, which suggests that they recognize that SWIFT won't be replaced by the base layer network. And those tokenomics people are partly to blame. They simply didn't have tokenomics correctly, which is why it failed. No one would care if we only had the cumbersome, slow mining that Bitcoin had. By now, it would have supplanted SWIFT. Oh, I see. SWIFT has been completely supplanted by nothing else. So is her claim that it will simply continue as is with nothing to replace it a sincere one? For example, what does she say? To be honest, I'm not even sure that I haven't.
For years and years and years and years, I return and watch my films. Ripple can receive a certain percentage of it, but I'm not suggesting Swift will entirely disappear, for a variety of reasons that aren't worth discussing for the sake of this video. As I've always stated, it's still a victory even if they only receive a specific portion of what they now have. I mean, even if she doesn't like the pace, I don't care if she doesn't like it. If there are companies that are remittance firms that actually use Ripple payments and use XRP as a bridge currency, they just keep expanding. It's still a success. It's a commercial success. It doesn't make sense, but instead of supporting it, she's knocking it down and declaring, well, this is it. They're just admitting it didn't work. And what are the reasons why banks won't implement it? Does she fail to realize that banks can use Ripple payments without even holding XRP? Is she simply ignorant of this information? They don't seem to care who would be interested in tokenomics. You don't even need to have XRP to use that. So why the fuck would a bank or remittance company care? There's no logic behind it. Is it possible that she is simply unaware of this information? Then she must do some dang research. But I think part of the reason Ethereum is running is the price has run a lot. She adds that she sees bills on when the US Treasury chooses which permissionless network to tokenize. Here she is discussing the tokenization of T-bills. Naturally, don't make this announcement.
I'm speculating, since I've heard that something is imminent. Let's see what occurs here once more.
The XRP ledger already contains T-bills. Some businesses have already tokenized them and can do so. Therefore, I've never thought that a single blockchain will capture the entire market, as if that were illogical. Therefore, it would be great if Ethereum, Hedera, and other chains were to obtain some. That's okay. However, I'm still a little confused as to why that would be the preferred option, especially with a slower, more expensive chain like Ethereum.
Since you need to comprehend the XRP ledger, for example, it was created especially for this reason and excels at it. It's extremely great to do that whenever it has to do with payments, which is what we're talking about when we discuss tokenizing financial assets. And that's all okay. If other companies decide to go with other chains, I don't mind at all. Just give it some time. Distributing spaced, deal-faced is what we reflect Tuesday works out, and we'll see if they made the right choice or if they just made a selection that was mediocre at best. However, it does make sense for assets to be released on numerous chains if there are users on other chains, particularly at this time in 2025, when everything is still being sorted out and markets are still working things out. As if it's a normal aspect of growing up, it's okay.
Where's the next part, she asks. But she explains that it's because the US Treasury chooses which permissionless network would tokenize T-bills, and naturally, they didn't. She says, I'm speculating about something that I heard is coming at that point. All right, she continues, they're not going to use Ripple. All well. Once more, she is confusing XRP with Ripple. Which then is she really referring to? I'm not sure. Then she announces that Ethereum will be used. They might utilize Bitcoin, but the layer 2s of the cryptocurrency aren't developed enough for that, are they? All right, I can't be serious about this. I simply cannot be serious about this. The world has already concluded that she is mistaken. Because of this, XRP has the third highest market capitalization. She is mistaken. I tell you, Caitlin Long, you need to examine yourself and ask yourself, what am I not understanding? I don't think this XRP stuff is worth anything. It is ineffective. The tokenomics are flawed. It's a fraud. It's an exit scam. My name is Caitlin Long. I've stated in public that I think these things. Why does it keep happening? Why isn't everyone else able to recognize that it's a scam, an exit scam, that tokenomics is flawed, and that it's useless? If I were Caitlin Long, wouldn't I eventually turn inward? When do you look and you think, wait a minute, maybe I'm the one who doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about? She concludes by saying that they must adopt the mindset of a bank and the most developed blockchain platform.
Ethereum is by far the best option for this kind of issuance. All right, great story, dude. I'm not tribal. Just to reiterate, I would like to see a wide range of items tokenized on various networks. Yes, I would, and I'm happy that's taking place. Additionally, I own a wide variety of cryptocurrencies. Yes, I do. My biggest holding is XRP. Okay, call me prejudiced, but I want the ecology as a whole to prosper. What is this trip? Did she just spew everywhere? There is simply no sense to it. Jungle Inc., another XRP YouTuber, is also present. He had a really decent take on this, in my opinion. I'll pause to say that I believe he meant dream when he added, Ripple is living Caitlin Long's nightmare. He shared this post.
Ripple is living Caitlin Long's dream, only through the context, since Ripple's doing what Caitlin Long wishes she could do.
Anyway, so then he says,
While she's been begging for a Fed master account since 2020, Ripple is now gliding toward one with institutional support, real regulatory momentum, and a stablecoin to match. All that time spent lobbying, suing, and talking about fair access, and now Ripple walks in with the infrastructure and partners the Fed actually wants. This isn't personal, it's just what happens when you build real pipes instead of preaching from the sidelines.
the system isn't fair. It's not supposed to be. It rewards winners. And right now, Ripple's winning. That's a good post. That's right. That is a good post.
And Ripple's winning, and she's posting this at the same time. Ripple is winning and has effectively become a competitor, especially if this trend continues with the Fed's master account and the national bank charter becoming a new competitor. She's just trash talking a competitor. That's what it looks like to me, folks.
I can't take any of this crap seriously, though. It's just like the stupidest.
Things she's saying, like, I know she's smart and she's informed about all sorts of stuff. I get that. But she sounds like somebody new to crypto with what she just said on this podcast. That's what I would expect from somebody who doesn't know a damn thing. This is why we cannot have nice things. I'm telling you,